On the night of January 19th, 2023, Christopher Wood spoke to his estranged wife, Heather, during a phone call. He said, "This is how it ends for us." Earlier that evening, their 14-year-old daughter, Ava, had sent her mother a text. She advised Heather to turn off her phone's location sharing. By the next morning, Ava Wood would be found dead in her bed. She had been shot by her own father. He then turned the gun on himself. The home was at 6 Triangle Place in Baldwinsville, New York. What unfolded was not merely a private tragedy. It was the final act in a chain of documented warnings that were recorded, investigated, and ultimately not enough to save her. I'm your host, and this is the story of Ava Wood, the story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how we protect children when families fracture and danger escalates in plain sight. Ava was 14 years old. She was a 9th grader at Durgee Junior High School in the tight-knit village of Baldwinsville, New York. She played soccer number 18 on the junior varsity team and ran track, where she was among the fastest girls on the squad. Coaches described her as self-directed, competitive, and possessing an unprecedented work ethic. Trying hard was her thing, her track coach said. Friends remembered the small, joyful details. She sat across from her best friend at lunch every day and always shared her Welch's gummies. Her laugh was distinctive, eyes closing into what her friend Emily called little rainbows. She spoke openly about her dreams. She loved her father. One day, she told her friend, she wanted a family of her own that she would spoil and love endlessly. She lived primarily with her father, Christopher Wood, after her parents separated and divorce proceedings began. On the morning of January 20th, 2023, Ava did not show up for school. Her mother, Heather, who had received a strange and ominous phone call from her estranged husband the night before, asked police to conduct a wellness check at the home on Triangle Place. What officers found inside would leave even seasoned investigators shaken. Ava had been shot while she slept in her bed. Her father was found in a separate bedroom, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A shotgun lay beside him. This documentary examines not only what happened inside that house, but why it was allowed to happen. In the months and days leading up to January 20th, there were multiple documented contacts with law enforcement, a stalking complaint in March 2022, harassing text messages sent days before the tragedy, a father struggling with mental health who had recently purchased a shotgun, a firearm that, in New York, requires no permit, a 14-year-old girl who, on the evening of January 19th, texted her mother to turn off location sharing on her phone, evidence that even the child sensed the surveillance and control tightening around her family. And then the final, chilling words spoken over the phone. This is how it ends for us. How does a system charged with protecting the most vulnerable among us respond when warning signs accumulate? What combination of policy thresholds, investigative limitations, and gaps in risk assessment allowed a child living in a home marked by escalating control and mental health decline to remain unprotected until it was too late? Over the course of this documentary, we will reconstruct the timeline with precision. We will examine the prior incidents and the institutional responses. We will listen to the voices of those who knew Ava best, and we will ask the difficult questions about what more could and should have been done. Ava Wood was not a statistic. She was a vibrant, loving, competitive young woman whose future was stolen while she slept in the place she should have been safest. Her story matters because every child in a similar situation matters, and because we owe it to her, and to every child like her, to examine where the system failed and how we can do better. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger or experiencing domestic violence, coercive control, or threats involving children, please reach out for help right now. In the United States, call or text the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-797-233. Revisit thehotline.org. Local law enforcement and emergency services are available by dialing 911. Your safety and the safety of children in your care are paramount. This is the story of Ava Wood. And it begins with a single, devastating question: what will it take for the warnings to finally be heard? Ava Wood was the kind of young person who reminded adults why they chose their work. Her track coach, Tiffany Stubman, saw it immediately. Ava was self-directed. She had drive. She possessed what the coach called an unprecedented work ethic. When the coach said, "Ava, do this," Ava did it without complaint, without hesitation. Trying hard was her thing, Coach Stubman said. Ava was competitive, but not in a way that diminished others. When she placed second in a race, the disappointment fueled her. She pushed harder the next time. She wanted to be faster. She wanted to be better. And she usually was. She was among the fastest girls on the team, consistently placing at the top in the 200-meter dash and the 400-meter run. Off the track, Ava brought the same energy to everything she touched. She played soccer number 18 on the junior varsity team at Durgee Junior High School. Her soccer coach, Tom Hartshorn, described her as having an energizing personality on and off the field. She made practices brighter. She made games more fun. She was a leader without needing to announce it. Her closest friend, Emily Calkins, sat across from her at lunch every single day. Ava always shared her Welch's gummies. It was a small ritual, but it spoke volumes about who she was. They laughed about geometry as subject. Neither of them fully understood, and they laughed often. Ava's laugh was unforgettable. When she laughed, her eyes would close and form what Emily called little rainbows. Emily and their friends would take photos of that face because, as Emily said, nobody else could recreate that face. It was uniquely Ava. Ava was an honor roll student. Teachers loved having her in class. She was popular, social, and had a tight circle of friends, yet she never made anyone feel left out. She was vibrant and loving. In third grade, she dressed as a bumblebee for the Halloween parade and flashed a big smile that stayed with people who knew her even years later. To her friend Emily, Ava spoke openly about her dreams. She loved her father. One day, she said, she wanted a family of her own. She wanted to spoil her children and love them endlessly. That was the future she imagined for herself, full of the same warmth and generosity she gave to everyone around her. These are not generic descriptions of a nice girl. These are the specific lived details of a 14-year-old who ran fast, shared what she had, made her friends laugh until their sides hurt, and dreamed of giving the same love she received. She was a competitor who tried harder than anyone expected. She was a friend who remembered the small things. She was a daughter who loved her dad and looked forward to becoming the kind of mother she hoped to be. When we lose someone like Ava, we do not only lose a life, we lose the light she brought into rooms, the energy she brought to fields, the laughter she created at lunch tables, and the future she had already begun to plan. That is the measure of what was taken.
14-year-old Ava Wood was a high achiever, a 9th grade honor roll student at Durgee Junior High, the MVP of the girls' JV soccer team, and a key member of the track and field team. Tiffany Stubman is Ava's former coach.
Ava had a serious competitive drive. She was one of my go-to athletes on the track and field team. She was someone that I can count on to perform at every single meet, just because she was just so fast and driven and had that competitive nature.
But Ava struck the perfect balance, focused but also fun and full of life.
There were times that the kids would try to sneak and do some tricks or try to alter practice, but for the most part, everybody, especially Ava, you can count on them to do what they needed to do and perform.
An exceptional athlete with a magnetic energy, lighting up every room she walked into.
Her smile, but she was a great friend. She had a great personality. She was a spitfire. She was just someone that you can count on as well. So that is a legacy that we want with her work ethic, her athleticism, and her friendships in the community, just to remember that that's how great she was. Somebody that you can count on always, on and off the field.
Thomas Freyer, the principal at Durgee, says Ava's death is the hardest thing he's faced in his 27 years in education.
The instability in the Wood family did not appear suddenly on the night of January 19, 2023. It had been building quietly and persistently for months, and in some ways, for years. Christopher Wood and Heather Wood were separated but still legally married. Their 14-year-old daughter, Ava, lived primarily with her father at the family home on Triangle Place in Baldwinsville. The separation had not brought peace. Instead, it had created a new and dangerous dynamic inside the household where Ava spent most of her time. After the separation, Christopher struggled deeply with his mental health. He was engaged in treatment. He was speaking regularly with a therapist. He was taking medication for his diagnoses. Yet the stress of the separation, the loss of the marriage, and the ongoing conflict with his estranged wife appeared to intensify his difficulties rather than relieve them. Friends and family later described a man who was depressed and increasingly focused on controlling the one thing he felt he was losing information about Heather's life. Christopher became obsessive about knowing where Heather was and who she was with. He demanded constant updates. He monitored her movements. This was not a passing phase of anger after a breakup. It was a pattern of coercive control that grew stronger over time. Heather felt the pressure of that surveillance, and crucially, their daughter Ava also began to feel it. In March 2022, nearly a year before the tragedy, Heather reported to the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office that Christopher was stalking her. She wanted the incident documented. She did not ask for his arrest. The behavior was recorded in official records, however. Because the conduct did not rise to the level of a felony charge at that time, and because Heather did not push for enforcement, no arrest was made. The system noted the problem. It did not intervene in a way that changed the trajectory. By early 2023, the pattern had escalated. Harassing text messages were being sent. Investigations were opened. Yet the underlying dynamic, a father living with his daughter while locked in a battle for control over his estranged wife, remained largely unaddressed in terms of protective measures for the child in the home. The instability was documented on paper. It was visible to those who looked closely, but it remained hidden from decisive action. This is the nature of hidden instability in domestic situations involving children. The warning signs exist in reports, in therapy records, in the child's own growing awareness. But unless those signs cross specific legal or procedural thresholds, the system often continues to document rather than disrupt. Ava Wood was living inside that documented instability every day she came home from school, every night she went to sleep in her father's house, and every time she sensed her mother being monitored. The instability was not invisible. It was simply not treated as urgent enough to change the living arrangement or restrict access to lethal means until it was too late. The danger did not explode overnight. It escalated layer by layer, each new warning adding weight to a pattern that was already visible but still not met with decisive intervention. By mid-January 2023, the conflict between Christopher and Heather had entered a sharper phase. Approximately 2 days before the tragedy on around January 18th, Christopher sent a series of harassing text messages to his estranged wife. The messages came from a blocked number, making immediate attribution difficult. Heather reported them. The Onondaga County Sheriff's Office opened an investigation. At that moment, the case was still active. There was not yet enough evidence to make an arrest. The system was aware. It was watching. But it had not yet acted in a way that removed the threat from the home where Ava lived. At the same time, Christopher took a concrete step that would prove fatal. Around January 4th, 2023, roughly 16 days before January 20th, he purchased a shotgun. In New York State, no permit or license is required to buy a shotgun. The transaction was legal. There was no automatic flag triggered by the ongoing domestic complaints or the active investigation into the harassing texts. A man in the middle of a contentious separation, with documented mental health struggles and a recent history of monitoring and harassing his estranged wife, was able to acquire a lethal firearm without legal barrier. That purchase sat in the background as the final days unfolded. On the evening of January 19th, between 9:30 and 10 p.m., Ava herself sent a text to her mother. She advised Heather to turn off her phone's location sharing. The 14-year-old was not only aware of her father's surveillance practices, she was actively trying to protect her mother from them. That single message revealed something profound. The child living in the home had begun to understand the danger and was taking small steps to shield the person she loved. Later that same night, Christopher called Heather. The conversation was strange and ominous. He told her, "This is how it ends for us." The words were not ambiguous in hindsight. They carried the weight of finality. Heather heard them. She was concerned, but the full meaning would only become clear the next morning. Shortly after midnight, Christopher sent one last text. It contained a photograph of himself and Ava, holding hands, in the context of everything that had come before the stalking report. The harassing texts, the gun purchase, Ava's warning text, and the chilling phone call. That image now reads as a disturbing final gesture, whether it was meant as reconciliation, manipulation, or something darker. It marked the last communication before the tragedy. Each of these moments, the blocked number texts, the legal gun purchase, Ava's own text about location sharing, the "this is how it ends" phone call, and the midnight photograph represented another layer of escalation. Each one was knowable. Each one was documented or experienced by someone. Yet none of them, on their own or in combination, crossed the threshold that would have triggered an immediate welfare check, a temporary firearm restriction, or a change in Ava's living situation. The escalation was slow enough that it could be explained away at each step. It was fast enough that by the time the final warning arrived, there was almost no time left to act. This is how danger often builds in homes, where control and mental health struggles intersect, not in one dramatic event, but in a series of smaller, accumulating signals that demand more from the system than documentation alone. To understand how the tragedy occurred, we must map exactly what the system knew when it knew it, and where the protective mechanisms stopped short. The Onondaga County Sheriff's Office had direct contact with the Wood family on at least 2 prior occasions. In March 2022, Heather Wood reported that Christopher was stalking her. She requested that the incident be documented. She did not request his arrest. The conduct was recorded, however, because it did not rise to the level of a felony under existing law at that time, and because the reporting party did not push for enforcement, deputies were not required to make an arrest. The system created a record. It did not disrupt the behavior. By January 2023, the situation had escalated. Christopher sent a series of harassing text messages to Heather, some from a blocked number. An investigation was opened. The case was still active on the day of the tragedy. There was not yet sufficient evidence to effect an arrest. Again, the system documented the complaint and began an inquiry. It did not, at that stage, have the legal threshold or the immediate mechanism to remove Christopher from the home or restrict his access to a firearm. Christopher Wood had documented mental health challenges. He was engaged in treatment, speaking with a therapist, and taking medication. Yet there was no automatic or routine integration between his mental health treatment and the ongoing domestic violence complaints. Mental health records and domestic violence reports existed in separate systems. No single point of coordination triggered a higher-level risk assessment or a temporary firearm restriction, even after a shotgun was legally purchased during an active domestic investigation. In New York, the purchase of a shotgun does not require a permit or license. There was no legal barrier preventing Christopher from buying the firearm that would later be used in the tragedy. The gun purchase did not automatically flag the ongoing sheriff's office investigation or his mental health treatment history. The system allowed a legal transaction to proceed without cross-referencing the documented domestic risk. Critically, there was no Child Protective Services history triggered in connection with these events. Ava Wood, a 14-year-old living primarily with her father, during a period of escalating control, surveillance, and mental health decline did not become the subject of a CPS investigation or a child-centered safety plan. The system treated the domestic complaints as matters between two adults. It did not sufficiently center the child who was living inside the documented instability. At each stage, the 2022 stalking report, the January 2023 harassing texts, the mental health treatment, and the legal gun purchase, the system saw pieces of the risk. Records were created. Investigations were opened. Treatment was noted, but the thresholds for decisive protective action, earlier welfare check, temporary firearm, hold, change in custody living arrangement, or mandatory child welfare involvement, were never crossed in time. The final welfare check on the morning of January 20th arrived after the fact. By then, the system's role had shifted from prevention to investigation of a completed tragedy. This is the map of what the system knew and where it stopped. Documentation without sufficient disruption, legal transactions without risk-based restriction, and adult-focused responses without adequate child-centered safeguards. Ava Wood lived with her father. She told her closest friend how much she loved him. She trusted the home she shared with him. On the night of January 19th or the early morning of January 20th, 2023, Christopher Wood entered his 14-year-old daughter's bedroom while she was asleep in her bed. He shot her. She died from a gunshot wound to the head. He then retreated to his own bedroom in the same house and inflicted a fatal self-inflicted gunshot wound. A shotgun was recovered beside his body. This was not a stranger. This was not an intruder breaking into the house in the middle of the night. This was the man she lived with every single day. This was the father she loved and spoke about with affection to her friends. This was the parent who was entrusted with her care during her parents' separation and divorce proceedings. Ava had chosen to live primarily with him. She returned to that house after school, after soccer practice, after track meets. She slept in her bed in that home, believing it was safe. The betrayal is absolute because it violates the most fundamental contract between a parent and a child. A child is supposed to be able to sleep without fear in the home of the person who is supposed to protect her. Ava had no reason to fear the sound of her father's footsteps approaching her bedroom door. She had no reason to believe that the man who raised her, the man she loved, would become the person who ended her life while she slept. There is a particular and devastating cruelty in this kind of betrayal. Ava was not killed in a moment of public conflict or during an argument she could have seen coming. She was killed in the most ordinary and vulnerable state. A person can be in a sleep, in her own bed, in the place that should have been her sanctuary. The person who was supposed to be her greatest protector became her killer in the quiet hours of the night. We must also remember who Ava was becoming. She had told her friend Emily that she loved her father and that one day she wanted a family of her own. She wanted to spoil her children and love them endlessly. She was already imagining the kind of mother she hoped to be: warm, generous, present. That future was stolen from her by the very person she trusted most in the world. This is the core of the tragedy. We must confront not only that a bright, competitive, loving 14-year-old girl was killed, but that she was killed by her own father in her own bed while she slept. The system may have failed to intervene in time, but the final, irreversible act of betrayal came from within the walls of the home she called her own. When we speak the name Ava Wood, we must speak this truth with clarity. She was taken by the person she loved and lived with, not by someone outside her world. And the final hours of January 19th, 2023, contained multiple clear signals that might have altered the outcome if acted upon in time. These were not vague warnings buried in old reports. These were immediate, specific, and occurring in real time, the last realistic window before the tragedy unfolded. On the evening of January 19th, between 9:30 and 10 p.m., Ava Wood herself sent a text message to her mother, Heather. She advised Heather to turn off her phone's location sharing. The 14-year-old was not only aware of her father's surveillance and controlling behavior, She was actively trying to protect her mother from it. That single message was a powerful signal. It showed that even the child living in the home had begun to understand the danger and was taking steps to shield someone she loved. It was a warning coming directly from inside the household. Later that same night, Christopher Wood called Heather. During that phone conversation, he spoke the words that now carry unbearable weight in hindsight. "This is how it ends for us." The statement was strange, ominous, and final. Heather heard it. She was concerned enough to remember it and report it the next morning. But at the time, the full meaning was not yet clear. The call represented a direct and explicit communication of intent, or at least of a mindset that something irreversible was about to happen. Shortly after midnight, Christopher sent one final text message. It contained a photograph of himself and Ava holding hands. In the context of everything that had already occurred that evening, Ava's warning text, the chilling phone call, and the months of escalating control, this image now reads as a disturbing final gesture. Whether it was meant as a twisted form of reconciliation, manipulation, or something darker, it marked the last known communication before the tragedy. It was another signal, another moment that could have prompted immediate action. Heather Wood was concerned. She had received a text from her daughter about location sharing. She had heard the ominous words on the phone. She had seen the midnight photograph. Yet the decision to request a wellness check was made the next morning, when Ava did not arrive at school, and there was no response at the home despite cars being parked in the driveway. By then it was too late. The final mischance was not a single dramatic moment that everyone ignored. It was a series of real-time signals, Ava's own text, the explicit phone call, the midnight photograph that arrived in the hours immediately before the tragedy. Each one represented a window, however narrow, in which a welfare check, a call to authorities, or a different intervention might have changed the course of events. The system and the people involved had pieces of the information. What they did not have was enough time, or perhaps enough recognition of the urgency, to act before it was too late. These final hours stand as the clearest example of how close intervention came and how narrowly it missed. On the morning of January 20th, 2023, Heather Wood made the decision to request a wellness check at the family home on Triangle Place in Baldwinsville. Her 14-year-old daughter Ava had not shown up for school that day, and there had been no response at the house despite the fact that vehicles were clearly parked in the driveway. Heather had already received a strange and deeply concerning phone call from her estranged husband Christopher the night before. During that call, he had told her in a chilling tone, "This is how it ends for us." Now with Ava unreachable and the house remaining silent, Heather's concern had turned into genuine fear for her daughter's safety. She contacted authorities and specifically asked them to go to the home and check on Ava. Officers from the Baldwinsville Police Department, along with members of the Onondaga County Sheriff's Office, responded to the request for a wellness check. When they arrived at 6 Triangle Place, the scene immediately raised serious alarm. Cars were parked in the driveway, which strongly suggested that someone should be home, but no one answered the door despite repeated knocking and attempts to make contact. After making entry into the residence, officers discovered 2 bodies inside the home. 14-year-old Ava Wood was found in her bed. She had been fatally shot. In a separate bedroom, her father, 51-year-old Christopher Wood, was found deceased from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A shotgun was recovered beside his body. The scene was processed and investigated as an apparent murder-suicide.
When 14-year-old Ava Wood didn't show up to Durkee Junior High School Friday morning, her mother called 911, asking police to conduct a welfare check on her daughter and estranged husband, who lived in this home in the village of Baldwinsville.
The woman provided a set of keys to our officers, and we entered and searched that residence.
What they found inside? The unimaginable. Ava shot and killed in her bedroom. The suspect? Her father, 51-year-old Christopher Wood, found in a separate room, dead from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound.
It's not an easy scene.
Ryan, that 14-year-old girl is Ava Wood, a 9th grade student here in Baldwinsville. Ava and her father, 51-year-old Christopher Wood, were both found dead inside his home early this morning around 8:30. It appears to police that Ava was shot and killed by her father before he turned the gun on himself. The bodies were discovered by police after the girl's mom, the man's estranged...
Sheriff Tobias Shelley, who has served in law enforcement for 29 years, later publicly described the scene as one of the most challenging and difficult he had ever encountered in his entire career. The discovery of a child killed in her own bed by her own father left even highly experienced investigators deeply shaken and affected. The impact on the Baldwinsville community was immediate, widespread, and profoundly emotional. The Baldwinsville Central School District quickly canceled all after-school activities, athletic events, and performing arts practices for the remainder of the day. Grief counseling services were made available right away for students and staff, and these services continued over the following weekend at the high school. The school principal later described it as one of the most difficult and heartbreaking days in his 27 years working in education. The human response from the broader community was swift, deep, and deeply emotional. A candlelight vigil and prayer service was held at St. Mary of the Assumption Church on the Sunday evening following the tragedy. More than 1,000 people attended, filling the church to capacity and beyond. Former soccer teammates sat together in the front rows wearing their jerseys in tribute to their fallen teammate. Students, families, teachers, coaches, and neighbors filled every available space, many openly crying during the service. The event was live-streamed so that even more members of the community who could not attend in person could still participate and pay their respects from home. A GoFundMe campaign, organized by family friends, quickly raised significant financial support to help Ava's family during an unimaginably difficult time. The Onondaga County Sheriff's Office later had to issue public warnings about phishing scams that were impersonating fundraising efforts for the family, attempting to take advantage of the community's grief and generosity. In the days that followed, the deaths were officially ruled a murder-suicide. Ava's death was classified as homicide. Christopher's death was classified as suicide. There would be no criminal trial because the perpetrator was deceased. A fatality review was later conducted through the New York State Office of Children and Family Services, but it ultimately recommended no specific policy changes. The wellness check that Heather had requested arrived after the tragedy had already occurred. What remained was the painful and necessary work of mourning a vibrant 14-year-old girl and confronting the reality that the warnings which had accumulated over many months had not been enough to prevent what happened in those final hours. In the days following the discovery at 6 Triangle Place, the official determination was clear and final. Ava Wood's death was ruled a homicide. Christopher Wood's death was ruled a suicide. The investigation concluded that Christopher had shot his daughter while she slept in her bed and then taken his own life. Because the perpetrator was deceased, there would be no criminal trial. There would be no courtroom drama, no testimony under oath, no opportunity for the family or the community to see accountability carried out through the traditional justice system. The absence of a trial left many feeling that justice had been denied, even though the perpetrator could no longer harm anyone else. For the family and the community, this created a difficult and painful reality. There would be no public reckoning, no chance to hear evidence presented in court, and no formal judgment delivered by a jury. A fatality review was conducted by the New York State Office of Children and Family Services. The review substantiated allegations of inadequate guardianship and internal injuries against Christopher Wood. However, the final report recommended no specific policy changes or prevention measures. For many observers and members of the community, this conclusion felt incomplete and deeply unsatisfying. The warnings had existed in official records for months. The pattern of control and escalating behavior had been documented. Yet after the tragedy, the system determined that no adjustments to policy, practice, or thresholds were necessary. This left many people wondering whether the system had truly examined what went wrong. The public reaction extended well beyond Baldwinsville. National media outlets covered the story extensively. The image of a bright, athletic, honor roll 14-year-old girl, killed in her own bed by her own father, struck a deep and painful chord across the country. It became another tragic and public example of how domestic violence, coercive control, and mental health struggles can escalate inside a home with devastating and irreversible consequences. Locally, the shock was immediate, widespread, and lasting. The tight-knit Baldwinsville community had lost one of its most promising and beloved young people in circumstances that felt both shocking and, in hindsight, preventable. Students, teachers, coaches, and neighbors struggled to reconcile the vibrant, competitive, and kind girl they knew, the one who ran fast, shared her gummies, and made people laugh with the manner of her death. Many found it difficult to process how such a bright future could end so violently in the place she should have been safest. In the months and years that followed, the community made a conscious and deliberate choice about how to remember Ava. Memorial scholarships were established in her name. An annual soccer tournament was created to honor her memory and her love of the sport. Her teammates continued to wear her number during games as a tribute. Her story became a quiet but persistent call within the community to pay closer attention to warning signs in families experiencing separation, mental health struggles, and patterns of control. People chose to focus on her life, her kindness, and her potential rather than only on the tragedy of how she died. The public shock was real and deeply felt. The absence of a criminal trial left many questions unanswered. The official conclusion that no policy changes were needed left many in the community wondering whether the system had truly learned anything meaningful from what happened to Ava Wood. Her death became a painful reminder that even when warnings exist, the gap between documentation and decisive protection can have irreversible consequences. We tell this story not simply because a tragedy occurred, but because the record shows it was preventable. Multiple warnings existed. They were documented. They were experienced by people inside the home. Yet they did not lead to decisive protective action in time to save Ava Wood. Prior reports of stalking and harassment had been made to law enforcement. A child had signaled her own awareness of surveillance by texting her mother to disable location sharing. A father, in the midst of separation and mental health struggles, had acquired a shotgun without legal barrier. A chilling declaration had been made the night before the act, yet the thresholds for arrest, for temporary firearm restriction, for mandated child welfare intervention were never crossed until it was too late. This is not an indictment of individual officers who responded within the limits of existing policy. It is an examination of whether those policies and thresholds are adequate when a child is living inside a home marked by escalating control, documented complaints, and mental health decline. Ava Wood deserved every layer of protection the system could reasonably provide. She deserved to have the pattern of coercive control taken seriously. She deserved to have the presence of a minor in a high-risk household trigger a child-centered response. She deserved to have a recent firearm purchase during an active domestic investigation raise a red flag. She deserved an earlier welfare check when the signals became urgent. The questions this case leaves us with are not comfortable. What must change in how we assess risk when control escalates inside a family? What mechanisms should exist to temporarily restrict firearm access when domestic complaints and mental health struggles intersect? How do we ensure that a child living in a documented high-risk environment receives protection even when the reporting parent seeks minimal enforcement? These are not abstract policy questions. They are questions raised by the death of a 14-year-old girl who loved her father and was killed while she slept in the place she should have been safest. Every child in a similar situation deserves better. The responsibility to do better belongs to all of us who design, implement, and live within these systems. The death of Ava Wood highlights recurring and well-documented gaps in how systems respond to domestic violence, mental health challenges, and firearm access when they intersect inside a home with a child present. One clear gap is the need for stronger risk assessment tools that properly weigh patterns of coercive control, even when individual incidents do not meet the threshold for arrest. In Ava's case, there had been a stalking report and subsequent harassing text messages. These were documented, yet the system continued to treat each incident largely in isolation, rather than as part of an escalating pattern that placed a child at risk. Another gap lies in the integration between mental health treatment and domestic violence investigations. Christopher Wood was engaged in mental health treatment. However, there was no automatic or routine mechanism to connect that treatment history with the ongoing domestic complaints or to trigger a higher-level risk review when he legally purchased a shotgun during an active investigation. Firearm access during periods of domestic crisis also remains inadequately addressed in many jurisdictions. In New York, the purchase of a shotgun does not require a permit. There was no legal mechanism to temporarily restrict firearm access based on the combination of an active domestic investigation, mental health struggles, and the presence of a minor in the home. Red flag or extreme risk protection order laws, where they exist, could provide one tool to create space for safety without requiring a criminal conviction. Perhaps most importantly, child protective responses must be triggered more readily. When a minor is living in a household where escalating control and mental health decline have been documented, even if the reporting parent seeks minimal enforcement. In Ava's case, there was no Child Protective Services history connected to these events. The system treated the domestic complaints primarily as matters between two adults, without sufficiently centering the safety of the child who was living inside that documented instability every day. These gaps are not unique to one jurisdiction or one case. They appear across many tragedies involving domestic violence and children. The goal of examining them is not to assign blame after the fact, but to identify concrete changes that could reduce the likelihood of similar outcomes in the future. Stronger risk assessment, better system integration, temporary firearm restrictions during high-risk periods, and genuinely child-centered protective responses are not radical ideas. They are practical steps that could help ensure that documented warnings lead to protection rather than documentation alone. Ava Wood ran fast. She was among the quickest girls on her track team, consistently placing at the top in the 200-meter dash and the 400-meter run. When she placed second, the disappointment only made her push harder the next time. Trying hard was simply who she was. Her track coach described her work ethic as unprecedented. She brought that same energy to everything she did. Ava played soccer number 18 on the junior varsity team. Her soccer coach said she had an energizing personality on and off the field. She made practices brighter and games more fun. She was a leader without needing to announce it. Off the field, Ava was the kind of friend who sat across from her best friend at lunch every single day and always shared her Welch's gummies. It was a small ritual, but it spoke volumes about the person she was. Her laugh was unforgettable. When she laughed, her eyes would close and form what her friend Emily called little rainbows. Her friends would take photos of that face because nobody else could recreate it. It was uniquely Ava. She was an honor roll student. Teachers loved having her in class. She was popular, social, and had a tight circle of friends. Yet she never made anyone feel left out. She was vibrant and loving. In third grade, she dressed as a bumblebee for the Halloween parade and flashed a big smile that people still remembered years later. To her friend Emily, Ava spoke openly about her dreams. She loved her father. One day, she said she wanted a family of her own. She wanted to spoil her children and love them endlessly. That was the future she was already imagining for herself, full of the same warmth and generosity she gave to everyone around her. On a January morning in 2023, that future ended in the bedroom where she should have been safest. She was 14 years old. Her community did not remember her for the manner of her death. They remembered her for the light she brought into rooms, The energy she brought to fields, the laughter she created at lunch tables, and the quiet determination she showed every time she stepped onto a track or a soccer field. More than 1,000 people filled St. Mary of the Assumption Church for her vigil and prayer service. Former soccer teammates sat in the front rows wearing their jerseys. Students and families filled every space, many in tears. The service was live-streamed, so even more people could participate. An annual soccer tournament was later established in her name. Memorial scholarships were created. Her teammates continue to honor her number.
Honor. News Channel 9's Lindsay Peters has more.
At first glance, it may look just like another soccer tournament, but here, every goal, every cheer, and every jersey tells the story of Ava Wood.
I never could have imagined such an event in my life, but I also never could have imagined the impact that she had outside of her small bubble in this small community of Baldwinsville, New York.
This year's tournament included a 19-second moment of silence, a personal tribute shared by each player in their own way.
It's definitely a really good part to, personally me, I just talk to her during those 19 seconds before. Other people definitely do different things, and I think that's what makes it special. It's personal to everyone, whatever you want to do during those 19 seconds to remember her.
Ava's impact lives on in messages and memories, even in the shoes her former coach still remembers.
She wore two different shoes. That's what I distinctly remember about her. She would wear two different colored shoes, and one of the other teammates would be wearing the other shoes of hers, so they switched shoes, which I thought was pretty cool.
For Ava's mother, the outpouring of...
Ava Wood's life was short, but it was full of the qualities that make a community stronger. Competitiveness paired with kindness, effort paired with generosity, and dreams paired with quiet belief that she could make them real. May her memory serve as both a blessing to those who loved her and a persistent reminder that every child deserves to grow up in a place where the warnings are heard and the protections are real. She deserved better. Every child does.